Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Babylon Pastor podcast with your hosts, Michael
and Rob.
Hey, guys. Have you ever wanted to fit enormous topics into 30 minutes and still not understand what happened at the end of it? This is the podcast for you. What are we talking about this month, Rob?
We're talking about the end of the world as we know it. Yeah, kind of. I don't know. Eschatology, big word. What does eschatology mean, Michael?
The study of end things. Is there a bigger definition you wanted, or
no? That's the definition.
Okay.
It was really less climactic than I thought it would be, but
that's because let me say from the get-go, I am sure of a lot of things. Eschatology is one of those things. Like, you guys, as you listen to this, are going to realize that I'm pretty much just going to read off a piece of paper, and Rob's going to be the smart one through this entire podcast. I'm so, out of all the things, and I don't feel like I'm probably alone in this, but out of all of the theology that one can study, I would say that eschatology is probably, definitely my weakest subject.
Well, I think that one of the reasons that I've teased about that we should do this multiple times in the past, and it just never was more than teasing, more really, I guess. But it is a good subject to chat about because especially right now, because there are so many people who are at least folks within the Christian world who are our age-ish, who have been influenced by a lot of the Left Behind series, the movies from back in the day, that kind of stuff.
Might be scarred by that a bit.
So it's an important subject because now we have a whole church in America filled with people who are going, oh, the blood moons, everybody's freaking out, and looking for, just all these. I mean, we're all looking into it and going, is this has got to be it? He's going to come back soon, right?
Well, if you at one point never sat through a video of John Hagee with a board on the stage going through some blood moons, I don't know if you ever lived. I'm just saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, it actually is frustrating because there is such an obsession with it that I think it distracts us from the mission that we're to be on. Because if Christ comes back, no matter your view that we'll get into throughout the month, but no matter the view that you hold, when Christ comes back, if he comes back next weekend, awesome, right? But we have a job to do the rest of the week then, right? And it's so distracting to just be all obsessive about this and what's going on in Israel today, and the stuff that you start to see people doing and become obsessive about it. It's not helpful at all.
And I think really, I mean, what little bit, and I literally mean little bit, I know about this, it affects a lot of how your church, but also you personally live life as far as missionally, right? So if you think that if your eschatological view is it's something that's far off, then you're going to be very concentrated on, hey, what can I do now to teach my kids? What can I do now to affect society? What can I do now about bringing more people into the kingdom? Versus if like you're watching everything and you think it's next week, it's like, all right, ration, we don't just sell everything and we don't need to ration anything. Go out and sell all the stocks. There's been a lot of those are obviously extremes, but there's been people that have been part of movements or groups that are like, no, we're for sure this is next week. So they literally quit their jobs, they sell everything. And that's again an extreme, but your view on eschatology and the end things, it affects how you live and what you do and why you do it. And like you said, if it becomes obsessive, which it definitely, I think, was an obsession for many people when we were growing up, it can be problematic in a couple senses. One, it can be detrimental to someone's faith, honestly, if they've told over and over again that, no, it's definitely next week. No, it's definitely next year. Oh, no, here's all the signs. And then that just keeps falling through. And they're going to eventually be like, well, you obviously know what you're talking about. And secondly, this is all hoo-ha anyway. And then, I mean, especially if they base a huge part of their religious beliefs and systems on that. I've heard a lot of stories where in movements in the past, that's happened, where they just jump from one movement to the other and eventually go, yeah, this is all junk anyway, forget it.
Yeah.
So today,
yeah,
we're going to talk about commonalities, correct? Before we jump into much,
because I think so. Before we jump in, and if you're if you knew this was coming, like you're somebody that I know or that Michael knows, and you knew we were going to do this or whatever, you're going to be super disappointed today, because we're not going to be getting into we're not going to be actually getting into any of the millennial views today in this episode.
Just click, stop, come back next week.
Yeah. Just wait all month and then take all of them in at once. But today, honestly, I think one of the things that is super important is that we realize what things all of the millennial views, all of the different eschatological views hold in common, and the kind of common ground stuff, because, man, without that, this is a topic that people get into that cause a lot of division. And so it's really worth stating in the beginning that there are a lot of really smart, educated people, big names that you would know if you're in the church world, you listen to sermons, that kind of stuff. There are a lot of people who are premillennial in their thinking and have good reasons for it. And there are as many, there are scholars who are just as wise, just as educated, just as studied, who are amillennial, and the same for postmillennialism. And these are all men and or women who are more educated than I'm gonna be. I mean, probably ever, right? So I think it's important for us to note that, first of all, that and some of these guys share stages at conferences together. They get along. It's not like, oh, you're not a Christian, right? Which is sometimes our tendency in the church, you know?
I think so just doing the very surface level looking at this that I've done, it used to be a very divisive issue, so much so that like people would leave churches, whereas now it seems to be much more of an issue where they're like, all right, we disagree, but it's not worth dividing over, which is helpful, though I'm sure there's still some people out there that are like, if you ain't whatever, then I am not gonna be your friend. But luckily it seems to be, at least what I've seen online, that might come down to, though, and this is just a hunch, because nobody knows about nobody studied them, so now we don't know what we're even fighting about anymore. So nobody knows what the other one believes.
Yeah, I know, at least in my context where I live, and I know it can't be really different where you're at, but this is still a major enough issue. It's not talked about, right? Like the differences between Calvinism and Arminianism are talked about.
That's true, yeah.
But there are pieces to this eschatology puzzle that you tend to think, if you don't believe what, right, is kind of the reaction. We actually have people who have left churches, not at mine that I know of, but people who have left, or because pastor doesn't share the same view, and it's that important, right, to them. We have, and I know the pastor, and he's not like up preaching that view every day. Certainly, I'm sure, plays a role in his preaching, but but he's not preaching a series on why this is right, kind of a thing.
Yeah, I don't remember the last eschatological series I heard.
Right, and I don't
maybe
wanna.
youth group, right?
I honestly, I don't, I struggle with the subject a little bit because of the lack of open-mindedness of people. Because if you're listening to this podcast or watching the YouTube video or whatever, and you and you don't really have a view, or you haven't thought about it, then you're probably going to get more out of this than anybody else, honestly. If you're already so set on some view, and this is probably just going to trigger you more than anything else. But
this series will be an elementary, and by elementary I mean kindergarten level introduction into the topic that you can then go through, as Rob said, and talk and watch videos by much more educated people on this subject. So what are the commonalities then that we have between well, 3 or 4, it depends there, that premillennialism kind of splits there, but what are the commonalities that we have between these 3 then that we can kind of use as a jumping board, if you would?
Yeah. So there are a few things that we should all definitely keep in mind, right? First of all, as I said this to you before we started recording, but I was very much, before I started looking into this, I was a guy that it was intentionally my answer to basically say, so I believe Jesus is coming back. We're all looking forward to that. Look forward to it with me. Now get out of my face, right? Like, because
that's my response.
but there is truth to that statement, right? And actually, without the get out of my face, saying it that way certainly isn't good. But the reality that there will be a real resurrection, a real coming of Christ. Every one of the views that we're going to look at this month believes that wholeheartedly. Everybody agrees on that. And that is, in fact, the most important piece, right, of the entire puzzle. And in the same way that we look at Genesis, and we can argue about 24-hour days or long periods of time, days or whatever. But the point of the beginning is that God created it, and in the image of God, and the stuff, right? That it's not so much the how, even though that's important. It's the why and the what, right? And so Revelation, eschatology, Thessalonians, Olivet Discourse, all the scriptures for eschatology are similarly important, but they all point all of us to Jesus is coming back.
Yeah.
And that's something that we all should look forward to. I think that really is the biggest commonality, that is bigger than our divisions on the subject.
It seems like, and I mean, again, you're more knowledgeable of this than I am, but it seems like that there's a lot of agreed upon points as far as the resurrection, judgment, what, there's tribulation, what that's going to look like. It's the details in all of that is the differentiating parts, because of the scripture not being incredibly clear on it, or it can, so we all go, yeah, those are things, but I believe this one, it's going to happen this way. And somebody else goes, well, I believe it's going to happen this way, which is, I think, why we can all agree while disagreeing on wherever you land, or just trying to figure it out, because there are commonalities that we all say, yes, there's going to be a resurrection. Yes, there's going to be a judgment. Yes, Jesus is coming back. It's just all of the details of when that happens, or what that looks like happening, or that seems to be kind of the I don't know how to word it here. The difference. Timing. Timing. Yeah.
Timing is the big difference. There are a lot of things that all of these have we could talk about the beast, or
Yeah.
the Antichrist stuff, or the tribulation, like you said, the rapture. Okay.
Yeah.
The premillennialism holds this secret rapture idea, but every one of the millennial views holds that there will be a rapture, in that Christ comes and the church is raptured to her king, sort of a thing, right? So there are a lot of commonalities. It really comes down to the timing of the stuff and how you read and take scripture when it comes to that. Big the big arguments come in, honestly, between dispensationalism and non-dispensationalism. That's really where the fighting happens, mostly. But the commonalities are actually a lot. There are a lot of common things. I think the one thing that Christ is going to come back for his church to reign physically and with us, that is something that we all look forward to. It outweighs all of the other stuff that may be disagreements, big or small. It's just that this is something that every church member of the invisible church in the world can stand in the same room together and raise their hands up to God, and regardless of the other stuff when it comes to eschatology. I heard a lot of I've heard a few times before very educated people give their view and why and the details of it and stuff, and then they'll say something like, but I'm completely open to Jesus changing my theology in the air. Right. And I think that's an important posture to have, right?
Yeah. When this happens, I'm going, oh, I was wrong about that.
I think another thing that everyone agrees on is or should is that we don't know the timing, right? And while I think that's true that everyone would say that, sometimes we don't act like that, but even the people who are looking around at our circumstances now in the world and going, oh my goodness, he's coming back now, right? Even that group of folks would also acknowledge that, well, every generation literally since Christ has thought that because of some things going on in culture.
And just carefully to put in here, if they don't say that, if they don't go, I could be wrong here, then you might want to run.
They're crazy.
My brief study of like the burned over district and the Great Awakenings and stuff, the people that were hard on it about, no, this is definitely it, those were the crazy people. So if they don't leave some room for, if I forget the name of it, but there was like this one guy that 3 times he was like, no, this is definitely the hard and fast date, and then he kept changing it. So obviously you need to look out for that. Though again, luckily, I think because there are so many commonalities now, as far as the understanding that, hey, we don't know. There doesn't seem to be that hard stance of at least I don't know. Maybe I just don't talk to enough people about it, but there does seem to be enough commonality where if somebody were to stand up and be like, no, it's tomorrow, we'd all be like, you're crazy. So that I could be totally wrong about it. Again, it could go back to the fact that we just don't talk about this enough in the church, and because of that, we're just not educated. So we're just like, I think out of all the subjects that we're going to cover ever on this podcast, eschatology is kind of like the what?
I think it's a circular thing. We don't talk about this in the church world. Okay, I say the churches that we're part of right now, and many mainstream church, like the biggest group of churches don't talk about this on a regular basis. And it's and that, like you said, I was going to go somewhere else, but that like you said is is I think one of the reasons that we're really uneducated about it, while at the same time we're really uneducated about it, and so we don't talk about it in churches either. So it's like this circular thing that happens.
No,
I think that too, there seems to be either an all or nothing that you see. And what I mean by that is you either never hear anything about it from the pulpit or Sunday school or whatever else, like it's just not something the church talks about, or it's the only stinking thing you ever hear about, right? Like we're going through this Bible study on Revelations. We've been doing it for 14 years. We're almost to the chapter 15. Like bro, stop. Right. Like it's either an all or nothing. Like you very rarely, just have a church that is like right in the middle where we should be, with this kind of thing. So
that is an excellent point. We get like that a lot about everything in the church, theology, doctrine, mainly secondary issues. We're just like, no, this is you can't be here. Right. We do a 5-week series on why you shouldn't believe that.
Yeah. And what was I going to say? Another commonality that I think we have is that we forget what we're going to say. I
feel like I distracted you, and now you.
No, it's all right. It's all right. I'll just go here. So everybody also agrees with the end. The absolute end, like the final results, right? The judgment, the Christ is gonna. Oh, I know where I was gonna say before. So the judgment thing, though, everybody agrees with that. That's a common thing, right? Like there are no major millennial views that anyone holds that is going to say, so Jesus is not going to judge, because that's one of the very plain and clear things that happen. Again, it all just boils down to a timing thing. And the already not yet kind of thing when it comes to the kingdom. Okay. Yeah. So all of the views that we're going to talk about are based on the word millennium, right? And it comes down to that Revelation chapter 20, 1,000-year reign of Christ thing.
Out of everything you sent me, that was one of the main differences I saw. Where is Christ ruling now? Is he reigning now? Does that happen later? What does that look like? I was a bit educated, so thank you.
Well, that's where most of it lies.
Yeah,
like tribulation, beast, antichrist, rapture stuff. All of the other stuff is definitely part of the equation. Right. But the big differences are the millennial reign of Christ, like when and how that happens and stuff. But however, all of the views do have at least some sort of the kingdom of God is already here, but not yet realized. And that just is really biblical study and common sense. Right? Like very obviously people are still dying, right? I think people still cry sometimes, and there still might be some sickness. And I mean, like, so it's obviously, right, we're not at the end, right? So there is definitely a not yet attached to the kingdom of God, even if you're post-millennial and it's and you believe that the rule and reign of Christ, like the kingdom has been consummated, like he is the king right now and whatever. So even they would say that, there's certainly a not yet sort of thing.
Still to come.
So,
all right. So next week we will be looking specifically into premillennialism, which, let me see my notes here, is the most familiar and well-known today.
I think at least in America, not worldwide, but in America it is.
Yeah. And part of that is what we grew up with, which is specifically the dispensationalism, premillennialism. So, all right. So that will be next week. So here's the important thing to take away from this episode, if you're still listening. One, there's a lot of commonalities, that being that Jesus is definitely coming back, that there is definitely a resurrection, there is definitely judgment, and that we're not there yet. We're not to the end yet. Would that be the summation of probably?
Yeah. Yep. And this isn't so important. You need to fight and call each other unbelievers.
Yeah.
So that's my way of saying, don't be mad at me the rest of the month.
Okay.
Okay.
Well,
All right.
we'll talk to you guys next week. See ya.